Alright guys, welcome back to another one. So today we've got to talk about the God of War Trilogy remake. In my opinion, the biggest reveal that came out of the recent State of Play. I'm actually in awe seeing that this is a real thing, only because I was pretty much convinced that Sony had all but forgotten about the God of War Greek Saga. As we know, back in 2022, so like 4 years ago now, the Classics catalog was added to PlayStation Plus, but more so an effort from Sony to bring more of the older era of PlayStation to PS4 and to PS5, namely PlayStation 1, 2, and PlayStation Portable games. 4 years on, and obviously we still don't have any of the God of Wars, looking at number 1 and 2, and Chains of Olympus and Ghost of Sparta for PlayStation Portable. And the reason why we believe that Sony haven't added these games is because they're wanting to actually do a proper remaster, or in this case, remake of those older God of War games. And that's exactly what is happening. That probably explains why these games still haven't been added to the Classics catalog. Now, details are pretty scarce on the Trilogy remake as of right now. Sony just more or less announced that this thing exists and will be coming in due time. T.C. Carson, the original voice actor of Kratos, is due to return, so it looks like they're going to be re-recording lines for the 3 games that will be included. But otherwise, there's no further details on the Trilogy as of right now. It seems as if the game is in very early development. No gameplay was shown, no details over on the PlayStation blog. It seems like this game is still quite some time away. I'd say it will probably arrive in time for PlayStation 6. I don't think we'll be seeing this until maybe 2028 at the earliest. So right now, anything to do with the Trilogy remake is just pure speculation. There's a lot of people that are really excited for this, including myself. It's taken Sony a long-ass time to finally do something with the older God of War games, and they so desperately need to do something with these games considering the popularity boost of the God of War franchise since God of War 2018, and of course Ragnarok. But naturally, there are also a lot of people that are pissed off about this and are upset about this. And don't get me wrong, there are actually some valid concerns here, especially because in recent times we've seen how some developers do treat their remakes, not providing a truly authentic experience and respecting the original's vision and detouring off into something else. A good example to use here is the recent Yakuza 3 Kiwami. A lot of content from the original experience in this remade version has been completely removed from the game. But the other side of these concerns is the current era of society that we are living in. There are certain things within media and art that people could get away with in the early 2000s that for the most part, unfortunately, just wouldn't float in our current day and age. Now, the 2 big things that stick out towards potential God of War censorship here is number 1, just looking at some of the meaty quick-time event kills and cinematic attacks and finishes and whatnot that appear throughout God of War 1 through to 3. I'm not too concerned about this. I think that a lot of those will still remain ideally the same. Some of them are pretty graphic, but I don't think they're really anything too crazy. We're still getting a lot of games that are very gory, quite graphic and explicit, even in 2026, so I'm not really too worried about that, but I have seen some concern revolving around that. But the big one here is the famous God of War sex minigames. So, whether it be God of War 1, 2, Ascension, Chains of Olympus, Ghost of Sparta, a minigame that's in all of those Greek-era God of War games is the topless woman minigame, where at some point in the game, you'll eventually get to a room where there's a bunch of topless women lying on a bed, and Kratos can do the dirty. Of course, the camera pans away from the action and focuses on like a side table with a vase on top. It's rocking back and forward as the minigame progresses, and as you're reaching Kratos' climax, the vase will eventually tip off the side table. A lot of people are worried that the remake is not going to contain the
sex minigame.
And that pretty much if the Trilogy sees any form of censorship in the absolute slightest, then this whole project is basically dead on arrival. Now, I do believe that there really is a slight chance of the removal of this minigame, just given the day and age that we're currently in. But I do agree with the opinion that, like, This minigame is iconic to the God of War games. Even though it's this meaningless thing, it is certainly one part of the God of War games, the OGs, that people do remember, and quite fondly. Sitting there when you're 10 years old playing God of War 2, showing your friends the sex minigame. Bro, look at this, I just got a crazy amount of red orbs for throwing it back. These are tied into the main path of all of these God of War games, though they are optional. The player doesn't actually have to partake in these in order to progress the game forward. God of War 3 though is a little bit different, as it does feature Aphrodite, you know, the Greek goddess of desire, pleasure, love, and yeah, you can do the deed with her in that game. And while sure, the minigame is still optional in God of War 3, the sex minigame is more kind of connected into the narrative of that game because of her being there compared to other God of War games. I think that it would be easy for them to completely remove the minigame for all other ones, bar that of number 3, as it actually makes sense to be there. Now, I don't think that it's fundamental to the God of War experience, but it is definitely a part of the OG's DNA, hence why it appeared in literally all of those games. Well, yes, I would be slightly annoyed and a little bit disappointed if they were to remove this. I don't think that this is a make or break situation for me. However, the anti-woke movement within gaming is quite a big thing, unfortunately. These are some of the most insufferable and annoying people within the video games community on the internet. And they turn things like this into an incredibly big deal, where they try to boycott game releases if the slightest bit of, say, a female character's panties have been covered up. Like, if it's there, awesome, they're respecting the original vision, as they should, but you would never find me taking to Twitter to bitch and moan about how Kratos is no longer going to be able to throw around his disco stick in a remade version of these games. A situation though that would absolutely piss me off, and that would probably make me think twice about purchasing the remade trilogy here, is the total change up to the core combat and gameplay experience of the game. And this is where I think the valid concerns come into play. So right now we don't actually know what type of a remake this is. Looking at something like Final Fantasy VII Remake, that game there is much more of a total reimagining to a certain degree. It doesn't play like the original, some of the story beats are a little bit different to that of the original, but if we look at something like the Crash Bandicoot N. Sane Trilogy, or the Spyro Reignited Trilogy, that is much more of a, I like to dub this, remakey remaster, where for the most part, it's still the original experience, just with a new coat of paint on top. And that's exactly what we need here from the God of War Remake trilogy. Because right now, people are concerned that there is going to be a total overhaul and complete change to the game's combat system to resemble that of what's found in God of War 2018 and Ragnarok. The over-the-shoulder, third-person, more action-adventure cinematic combat system. Now look, I love the combat system that's found in the newer God of War games. I think that there is actually more depth to those combat systems than people actually give them credit for. But there is a very clear difference between the hack-and-slash, almost Devil May Cry-esque gameplay that's found in the OG God of War games compared to what we have for the new era God of War games. The originals are also famous for their fixed camera angles as well. There are no camera controls across any of the original God of War games. These are intentional camera placements to further build on the atmosphere, but to also give you wide-angle views of the area you're currently fighting in so that you can see everything coming at you on screen. The level design of these games are also designed with the fixed camera angle in mind. So a lot of people are worried that the camera control scheme is going to be completely changed out. Now, speaking specifically about this, I totally wouldn't mind if there was an option within the settings menu to actually have a controllable camera. I think it would actually be cool to experience these older games with being able to control the camera itself. Keeping in mind though that the right analog stick is used to dodge. So how they would approach this, I don't know. But it is important that the fixed camera angles are retained for this remake. Again, it's really hard to know exactly how Sony are going to approach this. Right now, we also have no idea who's developing this, whether it is Santa Monica Studio or perhaps someone like Bluepoint, who have been doing a lot of the remakes for specific Sony games. I wouldn't actually mind if Bluepoint are the ones responsible for this, because for the most part, their remakes respect the original vision, generally just having an updated coat of paint. This is a little bit debatable, especially when looking at the Demon's Souls remake. A lot of people believe that the OG vibe and atmosphere was lost with the new graphics and art direction that was applied to the remake, so that is a risk that you could potentially run if Bluepoint are developing these games. But the most important part here, for me anyway personally, is just retaining the original gameplay experience, and that's something that Bluepoint do pretty well for the most part. The thing is though, whether it's a total overhaul across all three games or it truly is going to retain the original experience, I think that the trilogy is going to sell like hotcakes. Sure, there are people bitching and moaning about the remake as it goes. This is just typical average old Twitter, but people will be buying this package regardless. I do find it interesting though that this is only the first 3 games. Ascension is being left out of this. This is the PlayStation 3 prequel game that came after the release of God of War 3, set before the events of God of War 1, and it's just as much of a main installment as the first 3 are. Now, of course, you could also argue that both Ghost of Sparta and Chains of Olympus, the PlayStation portable God of War titles, are also as important as well, and I'd have to agree. So I do hope that there is a God of War Remake Volume 2 that includes Ascension, Ghost of Sparta, and Chains of Olympus, because these are incredibly important stories to the overall Greek saga arc. One thing I am a little bit worried about though with these games receiving a remake is specifically looking at God of War 1 and 2. I feel like with them receiving remakes, I just don't think we're going to see these games come to the Classics catalog, which is a real shame, because I know that a lot of people just simply want a remaster of those original experiences, or ports, just simple ports. People would be absolutely thrilled to just be able to play those PlayStation 2 games on the PS5. Now with the remake coming up, I think that if Sony were to release the original games either before or after, it probably would, not drastically, but in some shape or form, actually impact the sales of the remake. I hope I am wrong about this, and I hope that Sony do decide to eventually do emulated ports of the first 2 games at some point for the Classics catalog. Either way though, I'm excited. I just hope that the original experience for the most part is retained. I can definitely accept some things being changed or taken out, but the rule of thumb here is that whoever is currently developing this absolutely needs to respect the original's combat system. That hack and slash Devil May Cry combat system needs to be retained. Let me know your thoughts and opinions towards the God of War Trilogy remake in the comment section down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's video. Be sure to slippity slap that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Big shout out to my wonderful patrons and YouTube members. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and we'll talk again real soon.